This beautiful landscape before you is the lush and fertile Skagit Valley in northwest Washington. With the Skagit River and its numerous tributaries, it is the third largest watershed on the west coast, surely one of the wettest areas in the country, and only modestly populated. It also boasts a thriving agricultural industry and some of the nation's most productive farmland. Suppose we were to tell you a story about developers spoiling a pristine landscape like this, building houses without regard for the environmental consequences, and that their homes were using too much water and destroying habitat for salmon. Whose side would you be on? We have a pretty good idea. But what if we told you a different story? What if we told you a story of private agreements among special interest groups? In short, a story of control, power, and greed that left farmers and rural landowners without water. And what if those private agreements had nothing to do with salmon habitat? Whose side would you be on now? To start our story, let us introduce you to some people who bought property and made plans to build in an area designated by the Growth Management Act, and then suddenly found their plans thwarted by a series of rulings resulting from lawsuits brought by the Swinomish tribal nation.
It was quite shocking to learn that there was a basin, we weren't aware of this, that was closed and that no building permits would be issued, and we were kind of stuck here. We had invested a very substantial portion of our retirement savings in the lot and felt we would build a home, and this is where we would remain for the rest of our lives. We'd be close to our son, daughter-in-law, and take care of our grandson because they both work, and this was a very nice arrangement we had.
That was our retirement dream home.
Right.
Pat and I bought this property back in 1987, which is 25 years ago. And our intent and our objectives were simple. We wanted to have a place that we could build a retirement home, and we wanted to build some equity for our retirement. We've maintained it for 25 years. We've paid taxes on the property for 25 years. And 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be able to retire. And last December, we received a letter from Snohomish County, basically telling us that we had no water rights to this property anymore.
The problems faced by Howard and Debbie Rosenberg, Bob and Pat Stevens, and over 500 other landowners in the Carpenter-Fisher Basin stem from a series of rulings and lawsuits, all based on the assertion that residential wells are harmful to salmon habitat. Zach and Adele Barbarinas also own land in the Carpenter-Fisher Basin.
We bought this land because we thought it was improved to the point where all we needed was a building permit. And that clearly is not the case anymore.
Understanding such restrictions on water use starts with the in-stream flow rule. In-stream flow is the amount of water flowing in a stream or river measured in cubic feet per second. The law says that if the flow in a stream falls below a certain predetermined level at any time during the year, then it is illegal to take even one drop of water from that stream's entire drainage area. But what happens if the initial level is set arbitrarily high?
Set a precedent that is never met, or often never met, even in the wettest time of the year, it's going to fail. And that failure triggers a building moratorium.
Over half a century ago, in 1952, the actual amount of water flowing in the Skagit River was measured at about 7,000 cubic feet per second. But today, the in-stream flow rule mandates a level of 10,000 cubic feet per second, about 43% more, if you're keeping score, a level which realistically can never be met, resulting in no new water allowances for farmers or landowners. Another important concept related to in-stream flow is the recharge rate, the amount of water, expressed as a percentage, returned to an aquifer. The modern septic systems installed by rural landowners have recharge rates of 80% or even more. In fact, studies by the Colorado School of Mines and others show that when water is pumped from deep aquifers, the recharge can actually raise flow levels in streams and rivers.
There's studies that have shown that a well such as this actually helps improve stream flows.
After the Swinomish tribe demanded it, the Department of Ecology now says 100% of the water disappears into thin air, meaning that far less water is available, on paper at least. Common sense says nearly all the water goes back into the ground, but this isn't about common sense.
So essentially, every gallon we take out of our well comes out of a creek 2 miles from here, goes through our septic system, and disappears. How is that possible?
As things stand today, the Swinomish have prevented more than 500 landowners from using water in the Carpenter-Fisher Basin. But the Swinomish are suing to do this same thing to most farmers and rural landowners in the entire Skagit Basin, almost 6,000 landowners in all, destroying the lives and livelihoods of thousands of farmers and landowners. Now, we've said this isn't about fish. In fact, as we're about to show, the intent of the Swinomish Tribal Nation lawsuits is to control the water supply in the Skagit Basin. Because by controlling the water supply, you control growth and land use. Skagit County Commissioner Ken Dahlsted's response to a citizen comment may shed some light on this subject.
I've heard that Brian Kalusby, the Swinomish Tribal Chairman, has said that as far as he's concerned, water restrictions in the Carpenter-Fisher Basin are not about fish, but rather about control of land use.
I asked Chairman Cladsby if we couldn't find a way to settle the water issues for all of our citizens so our children and grandchildren wouldn't have to fight about it. And he told me that with utilities you control land use and that he intended to control all land use in Skagit County. So that's what he said.
This doesn't look much like a story about protecting salmon anymore, does it? It looks more like the story of an attempt to control the water supply in the Skagit Basin. In effect, to control the valley's economic and political future. If the issue were really about in-stream flow levels, why wouldn't Chairman Cladsby and the Swinomish Tribal Nation object to the proposed Tethys water bottling plant in Anacortes? Perhaps because if you have a plan to sell the water, you can make lots of money. Suppose these 5 buckets represent 25,000 gallons of water, the total amount that would be used in a day by all 500-plus Carpenter-Fisher Basin landowners. Remember that at least 50% of that water, and realistically upward of 80%, will go back into the system, recharging the aquifer. Now, let's compare that to the amount that would be used daily by Tethys, 5 million gallons of water per day. And all that water leaves the Skagit Valley forever. In 1996, the city of Anacortes and the Swinomish tribe met in secret to divide up the waters of the Skagit River. Rural landowners and farmers had no seat at the table and no voice in the process. The Swinomish tribe and the city of Anacortes came up with a plan which provided no water for rural landowners or farmers, and that's why we've had years of lawsuits and acrimony over water in the Skagit. Once again, this is not about fish. It's about control, power, and greed. Adding irony and insult to injury, the people who took away our water want to sell it back to us in trucks, and they want to sell huge quantities of it to private interests. We live in one of the wettest, least populated places in the Pacific Northwest, with the 3rd largest river on the west coast. We are also one of the most environmentally progressive communities in the country, leading the nation in protecting our farmland and forest land from development. We can balance the needs of fish and farming and landowners, but we have to be fair with each other and acknowledge that we're all part of a community with a mutual interest in solving this problem. A problem that started with a water plan that didn't even include farmers and rural landowners. All we are asking is to have a seat at the table and a voice in the process. Is that too much to ask?